The Valkyrie hegemony was not merely an empire. It was a living, breathing symphony of thought and light, a tapestry woven across 200 star systems over 3,000 years. Their ships, crystalline marvels that caught the light of distant suns, moved through the void not with the crude thrust of reaction engines, but with the gentle, psychic will of their pilots. They were the silent conductors of the Orion Spur's slow, stately dance. On Velkar Prime, the air itself thrummed with the collective, harmonious consciousness of its people, a low, psychic hum of order, wisdom, and profound, enduring peace. In the Chamber of Stars, the heart of this vast civilization, the 12 members of the High Conclave gathered. The room was a testament to their nature. Walls of living crystal that pulsed with a soft, internal azure light, resonating with the moods and thoughts of the conclave members. In the center, a perfect holographic rendering of the Milky Way galaxy spun in silent majesty. Standing at its epicenter was Archon Selithra. Her silver skin, a canvas for the fine, luminous lines that marked her 9 centuries of life, reflected the swirling star fields. Her 4 eyes, each a deep, knowing pool of amethyst, had witnessed the rise and fall of stellar empires. They had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. But today, they held a new, unwelcome emotion, a cold, coiling dread in the pit of her twin hearts. "Show them," she commanded, her voice a soft, chiming melody that belied the unease twisting within her. The grand tapestry of the galaxy vanished, collapsing into a single, unremarkable point of light at the very fringe of their detailed maps. A star the Valkyrie astrocartographers had dispassionately catalogued as T734. A star a young, ambitious species called Sol. This system was logged 2 centuries ago during the Great Survey, announced Counselor Vithran. At a mere 300 years old, his confidence was a bright, almost brash, beacon in the chamber. His psychic aura radiated the unshakable certainty of someone who had never known true failure. Long-range observation probes were deployed. The data they have returned is concerning. The hologram resolved, and a collective, subtle shift ran through the conclave. It was a world of breathtaking, almost savage beauty. A vibrant marble of blue oceans and green continents, swirled with tempestuous white clouds. It was primitive, yes, but it glittered with the stubborn, defiant lights of civilization piercing its night side. It was alive, in a way that many of their own meticulously managed worlds were not. The dominant species calls itself human, Vithran continued, his tone shifting to one of clinical dissection. Bipedal, mammalian, remarkably resilient. They have achieved basic spaceflight, sent their mechanical envoys to neighboring planets, and are now building their first-generation ships. They stand on the precipice of becoming an interstellar civilization. Counselor Mathara, her own long life lending her a profound, weary patience, spoke gently. Her aura was a calming, lavender hue. Many species reach this cusp. It is a fragile, beautiful time. It is the very purpose of our hegemony to shepherd such young races, to welcome them into the galactic community and help them avoid the pitfalls that claimed so many others. Vithran's aura flickered with impatience, a spike of citron yellow. This one is different, Mathara. Look beyond the surface. Look at their history. It is not written in data streams or peaceful progression. It is written in blood and fire. The serene image of the blue-green world was violently replaced. What followed was a silent, brutal montage, a psychic projection so vivid the conclave members felt echoes of the emotions within. It was a symphony of violence, a relentless, heartbreaking cycle. Humans clad in animal skins clashed with stone axes on muddy riverbanks. Then, legions in polished iron and leather marched, their swords glinting under alien suns. Then, endless, identical lines of men in blue and gray uniforms, firing rifles that choked beautiful landscapes with acrid smoke. The scale escalated horrifically. Trenches filled with mud and the frozen dead, the ghostly green haze of poison gas drifting across no man's land, cities like ancient Rome and modern Berlin reduced to firestorms, skies filled with the mechanical drone of winged death. And then, the ultimate terror. The terrifying, sun-bright blossoms of nuclear fire erupting over 2 human cities, the images captured from the doomed vessels themselves. The conclave watched, their psychic harmonies falling into a discordant, horrified silence as they saw the aftermath. The shadows burned onto walls, the silent, suffering victims. They saw the oceans of tears, the children searching for parents in rubble, the fields of white crosses and unmarked graves that stretched to the horizon. They felt the chilling reality that for decades, these humans had built thousands of these weapons and pointed them at their own hearts, holding their entire world hostage in a balance of terror. The montage ended. The silence in the chamber was heavier than any star. And yet, Mathara observed, her voice thick with a sorrowful, grudging respect. They endure. They create art of heartbreaking beauty alongside these engines of horror. They compose symphonies and write poetry that speaks of love and hope, even as they march to war. To bear such pain, to walk so close to the abyss of self-annihilation and not fall, that is not weakness. That is a terrifying, profound strength. Perhaps it is the very strength needed to survive a harsh galaxy. It is madness, Vithran countered, his voice sharp, his aura flaring a hot orange. You speak of their art, Mathara, while ignoring the blood in which it is so often dipped. They are a species born of conflict, sculpted by it. It is their default state. Imagine that fury, that relentless, chaotic ambition, turned outward. Imagine that wildfire loose in our galaxy, among our peaceful subject species like the thorny or the gentle Emtani. They would not conquer. They would consume. They would be a plague. A chaos storm in a library of ancient, irreplaceable texts. Archon Selithra raised a hand. The gesture was subtle, but it carried the weight of her centuries. The chamber fell utterly silent. The ghostly echoes of human suffering seemed to linger in the air. What is your counsel, Vithran? She asked, her chime-like voice now edged with frost. Containment, he stated, without a flicker of hesitation. A silent, non-invasive network of stealth satellites positioned at the helipause of their system. Any vessel, any probe, anything that attempts to cross the threshold, will be neutralized. No communication. No warning. They will never know we exist. They will attribute the losses to the perils of deep space. The peace of the galaxy, the safety of trillions of lives under our care, demands this unpleasant necessity. You speak of murder, Mathara whispered, the word hanging in the air like a psychic poison. You speak of killing explorers, of snuffing out the very curiosity that defines a soul reaching for the stars. You would make us the silent gods of their oblivion. Their only crime is the world they were born on, the history they have survived. And I speak of preventing a greater crime. Vithran's psychic projection was a blistering flare of conviction. Would you wait, Mathara? Wait until their generation ships are retrofitted with weapons. Until their primitive nuclear missiles are aimed at Velkar Prime. Until their chaotic, unpredictable nature shatters the peace we have nurtured for millennia. We must act now, while we still can. While the threat is contained to one world. For peace. For the greater good. The debate that followed lasted for 3 full cycles of Velkar Prime's sun. Ancient laws of non-interference, carved in psychic crystal at the founding of the hegemony, were weighed against older, darker statutes of preemptive preservation. Moral philosophies were dissected, futures were psychically probed. Mathara and her allies argued for observation, for subtle guidance, for at least attempting communication. But with each passing hour, the chilling images of human war, the terrifying potential of their chaotic, indomitable spirit, pressed down on them. The fear was a contagion. It was not the fear of defeat, but the fear of the unknown, of a variable their perfectly ordered society could not compute. The vote, when it was called, was unanimous. Archon Selithra cast the final, affirmative vote. As she did, a chill settled deep within her, a frost that her centuries of life could not thaw. She had lived long enough to know that some decisions were not merely political, they were scars upon the soul of the universe itself. This, she knew with a certainty that shook her very core, was one of them. We do this for peace, she said aloud, the words tasting like cold, dead ash on her tongue. But in the quiet, shielded sanctum of her own mind, a truer, more terrible thought echoed, we are not containing a monster. We are planting the seeds for one. We are giving them a reason to become everything we fear. On Earth, the year was 2157. The dream of the stars, once a bright, burning hope, was dying a slow, quiet death by 1,000 cuts. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the humming, sterile control center of the United Earth Space Agency, her knuckles white as she gripped the cool metal of the console. On the main screen, the last transmission from the generation ship Horizon's Dream was frozen, a final, heartbreakingly hopeful image of Captain Ilya Rostova, his young daughter, Anya, perched on his shoulders, both of them grinning as they pointed at the camera. The caption below read, "See you at Proxima. Transmission 1194. The timestamp was 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days old. After that, only silence. The same silence that had claimed the 14 ships before it. That's the 15th, Director Ben Chen said softly, his voice ragged with a grief that had become routine. He stood beside her, a man who had aged a decade in the last 3 years. The maps of lost ships on the wall behind him were a testament to his personal failure. 15 ships. 15,000 souls. Just gone. The World Council is shutting down the program, Yuki. There's no political will left. No hope. Yuki's eyes, dark and fierce, remained fixed on the frozen, smiling face of little Anya. She could almost hear the girl's laughter. It's not random, Ben. It's never random. Look at the data. The failure point is always the same. Always at the helipause, the very edge of the sun's influence. Always without a single distress call, a single fragment of wreckage. It's too clean. Too perfect. She turned to him, her jaw set. Something is out there. Something is waiting for us. Chen sighed, the sound full of a profound, institutional exhaustion. Yuki, we've been over this 1,000 times. The World Council, the funding committees, they see accident reports. They see the unknown perils of deep space, cosmic radiation bursts we don't understand, micrometeorite swarms, theoretical quantum instabilities. They see the tragic, inevitable cost of reaching too far, too fast. They don't see boogeymen. 15 identical accidents. She shot back, her voice rising slightly, fueled by a decade of frustration. The universe isn't that neat, Ben. Something is hunting us. Something intelligent. Something that doesn't want us to leave our backyard. And if you're right, Chen asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper, meant for her ears only. What then, Yuki? What could we possibly do against a power that can make our most advanced ships, filled with thousands of people, just vanish without a trace? What weapons could we build? What shields could we raise? We'd be throwing rocks at a starship. Yuki placed a hand on the cold screen, her fingers covering the image of the lost child. A single, hot tear traced a path through the fine wrinkles at the corner of her eye, but her voice was forged steel. First, we find proof. We show everyone the hunter. We make them see. And then we learn how to fight back. We learn how to break the fence. Chen looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the unextinguished fire that decades of failure and ridicule had not been able to quench. He saw the ghost of the young, brilliant postdoc who had first proposed a unified global space agency, who had believed in a future among the stars with a fervor that was almost religious. In her eyes, he saw the last ember of that dream, and something in his own resignation cracked. 6 months, he said, his voice firming with a decision that would likely cost him his career. A small team. The best I can pull from other projects without raising alarms. A black budget project, deep underground. No official oversight. No reports to the council. You find me something concrete, Yuki. Something undeniable. A piece of the hunter. Or this dream of the stars, it dies with us. For good. The promise felt like a physical weight on her shoulders, but Yuki Tanaka stood straighter. I'll find it. Whatever it takes. The promise would cost her more than she could possibly imagine. For 6 months, They worked in a converted basement laboratory beneath the USA headquarters, a dedicated dozen of the best and most open minds Earth had to offer, united by a shared, terrible suspicion. They were led by Dr. James Wright, a physicist so young his brilliance still had sharp, unweathered edges. He had lost an aunt and uncle on the Odyssey's call. It was James who found the ghost in the machine. "It's here," he said one late night, his face illuminated by the ghostly blue light of a data slate, the shadows carving his features into a mask of grim discovery. In the final nanosecond of every transmission from every ship, an energy spike, a signature. It's so fast, so clean, our standard diagnostic systems wrote it off as cosmic background noise or a data compression artifact. But it's identical, Yuki. Every single time. The same weapon. The same method. The same signature. Yuki studied the data, a cold, solid certainty settling in the pit of her stomach. The graph was unmistakable, a perfect, sharp peak in an energy frequency humanity hadn't even known existed, followed by absolute, flat line zero. "It's a fence, James," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "A perimeter. We're not exploring a frontier. We're rattling the bars of a cage. We've been in a cage this whole time, and we never even knew it." The realization was a physical blow, sucking the air from the room. For over a century, humanity had been prisoners, mourning their lost pioneers as martyrs to the unknown, building memorials and writing songs about their bravery. Now, they had to face a more terrible, more intimate truth. They were not just victims of chance, but of a deliberate, systematic culling. Their jailers were silent, merciless, and saw their curiosity, their hope, as a capital crime. The team worked through the night, a frantic, desperate energy driving them. By morning, they had confirmed the theory. The energy signatures pointed to weapons technology far beyond anything in human possession. The precision indicated automated systems of unimaginable sophistication. The consistency suggested a network, a perfect, invisible prison wall surrounding their entire solar system. "What do we do?" James asked, his voice hollow. The implications were staggering, enough to crush a spirit less resilient. Humanity wasn't alone, but their neighbors were cosmic wardens who had sentenced them to life imprisonment without trial. Yuki looked at the faces of her team, 12 men and women, their expressions a mixture of terror, fury, and a grim, determined clarity. The same emotions, she knew, would soon sweep across the entire planet. "First," she said, her own expression hardening into that of a general preparing for a war she never wanted, "we find one of those satellites. We need physical proof, something we can hold up to the world and say, this is real." She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. "And then we tell humanity the truth. And we figure out how to break out of this cage." It took another 2 years of clandestine, painstaking work. Yuki designed a special probe, the Whisper. It was small, slow, and its hull was designed to mimic the composition of a carbonaceous chondrite asteroid. It drifted, tumbling lazily, toward the edge of the solar system at a fraction of the speed of the doomed generation ships. It was, she hoped, too slow, too insignificant, to trigger the automated defenses. When it finally reached the theoretical perimeter, its passive sensors woke from their slumber. And it found exactly what Yuki expected. A satellite, hanging in the profound blackness. It was beautiful, a complex, geometric flower of crystalline material, facets catching the distant, feeble light of the sun in a mesmerizing dance. It was a work of art, a masterpiece of technology. And it was pointed, unmistakably, inward. At them. The whisper captured high-resolution images. It recorded the energy signature, confirming it was the source of the kill spike. It took spectroscopic analyses of the crystal, discovering elements and atomic structures that defied known physics. It gathered every piece of data it could for 3 precious, heart-pounding minutes. Then, the satellite shifted almost imperceptibly. A single facet glowed with a soft, deadly light. The whisper's transmission ended in a burst of static. But it was enough. Yuki compiled the data. The images, the signatures, the analyses, the undeniable proof of a silent, automated executioner. She sent a compressed data packet to Director Chen. He, in turn, forwarded it to the secure terminals of the World Council with a single, stark subject line. The message that flashed across the screens of the world's leaders contained only 4 words. 4 words that shattered one reality and forged a new, harder, angrier one. They've been killing us. The silence that followed the revelation was not one of shock, but of a collective, indrawn breath, held until lungs burned. The grief for the 15,000 lost souls, once a dull, accepted ache in the heart of the species, transformed. It became a sharp, burning coal of pure, undiluted outrage. The memorials were no longer monuments to tragic heroes, they were tombstones for the murdered. The void was not an indifferent wilderness, it was a prison yard patrolled by silent, crystalline executioners. The reaction was seismic, universal, and utterly unforeseen by the Valkyrie. Nations that had squabbled over borders, resources, and ideologies for centuries found their disputes to be the petty squabbles of children in a locked room. The concept of us and them evaporated, replaced by a single, powerful we. Corporations that had hoarded patents and fought trade wars opened their vaults, sharing technology that had been classified for generations. The global economy pivoted on its axis, its entire industrial capacity shifting toward a single, monumental goal. It was not just about escape. It was about answers. It was about justice. It was about finding the architects of their cage and making them explain. And if the explanation wasn't good enough, then humanity would ensure no one ever built a cage around anyone, ever again. On Velkar Prime, Archon Selithra received the first reports of the humans' discovery with a profound weariness that seemed to leach the very light from her silver skin. They knew. In the Chamber of Stars, the atmosphere was thick with a psychic anxiety that tasted of ozone and fear. It is of no consequence, Counselor Vithrin declared, though his psychic aura betrayed a distinct, flickering unease. So they found a satellite. They are primitives. They have barely mastered controlled fusion. Their fastest ships are crawling chemical rockets. What can they possibly do? We have thousands of warships. Technology centuries ahead of theirs. Selithra looked at him, her ancient amethyst eyes full of a pity he was too arrogant to comprehend. You still do not see, Vithran. You look at their technology and see inferiority. I look at their history and see a species that has spent its entire existence overcoming inferiority. We did not contain a threat. We nurtured one. We gave them a common enemy, a unifying purpose that their own internal divisions never could. We gave them 2 centuries of murdered children, murdered dreamers, to avenge. She turned to the star chart, to the small, yellow star that now seemed to pulse with a baleful, angry light. We wanted to prevent them from becoming predators. Instead, we handed them a justification for every aggressive instinct they possess. We taught them that the universe is not a place for wonder, but for war. And they are very, very good at war. The debate began anew, but it was different now, tainted by the acrid flavor of fear. Some, like Vithran, advocated for a swift, overwhelming strike, to scour Earth clean with a planet killer and be done with the problem. Others, led by a guilt-ridden Mathara, suggested immediate communication, a full apology, an attempt at reconciliation and reparations. Selithra listened to the arguments, but her hearts were heavy with a terrible, unshakable certainty. It is too late for apologies, she said quietly, her voice the only calm thing in the stormy chamber. They would see it as a lie born of weakness. And an attack would only prove their every dark suspicion true. It would cement our role as the monsters they now believe us to be. We have shown them the galaxy's cruelty. Now we must wait, and fortify, and hope against hope that we are strong enough to survive the lesson we have so foolishly taught them. They chose to wait. They chose to fortify their borders and recall their fleets. It was the gravest miscalculation of their long, long history. The years that followed on Earth were a fever dream of human ingenuity, a period later historians would call the Great Focusing. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now the head of a global, multi-trillion credit research initiative, watched from her command center as the impossible became routine. The alien crystal, once a mystery, was painstakingly synthesized in massive orbital forges, requiring the construction of entirely new energy grids. The principles of the directed energy weapons were reverse-engineered, leading to breakthroughs in physics that would have taken centuries under normal circumstances. The first fruit of this desperate labor was the EDS Defiance. It was humanity's first true warship, and it was a brutal, angular, ugly thing, a stark contrast to the elegant, beautiful killers that patrolled the edge of their system. There were no graceful curves, only sharp edges and thick, layered armor. Its weapons were not precise beams, but massive magnetic railguns that hurled tungsten rods at a fraction of light speed, and missile batteries armed with matter-antimatter warheads. It was not built for exploration or diplomacy. It was built for a single, terrible purpose: to break the cage. Its captain was Commander Sarah Chen, Ben Chen's great-granddaughter. She carried not just the weight of command, but the ghost of her ancestors' regret. He had died believing he failed humanity by not listening to Yuki Tanaka sooner. Sarah was determined that her generation would not fail. The day the Defiance engaged satellite P7 at the helipause was broadcast on every screen across Earth. Billions watched, their hearts in their throats, as the crystalline satellite came into view. It was even more beautiful and menacing up close. "It's scanning us," reported the sensor officer, her voice tight. "Same energy signature. Raise shields," Sarah commanded, her voice calm, belying the frantic beating of her heart. "All weapons, stand by. Hold fire until it commits." The satellite, following its ancient programming, did not hesitate. A lance of brilliant, coherent energy shot forth, striking the Defiance's shields. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring, lights flickering. The force of the impact was terrifying. "Shields at 60%. One more hit like that and we're dust," shouted the engineering officer. "Return fire," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "All batteries." The Defiance's response was not elegant. It was visceral. Railgun slugs, invisible in the vacuum, slammed into the satellite's crystalline hull, creating spider webs of fractures. Then, the missiles arrived. The nuclear-tipped warheads detonated against the damaged sections, and the matter-antimatter warheads finished the job. The satellite did not just break. It vaporized in a silent, furious sun that briefly outshone Sol itself, leaving behind a glittering, expanding cloud of crystalline dust. On the bridge, there was no cheer. Only a profound, trembling silence. Sarah Chen found tears streaming down her face, though she didn't remember when they started. She saw the faces of Thomas Stone, of Ilya and Anya Rostova, of all the ghosts who had waited in the dark for this moment. "We did it," her weapons officer, Lieutenant Marcus Stone, Thomas's great-grandson, whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it. Collect the debris," Sarah ordered, her voice hoarse but steady. "Every fragment, every mote of dust. We're taking it all home. This is just the first bar. The cage is still there." The Defiance returned to Earth not to cheers, but to a global, somber vigil. They were not celebrated as warriors, but honored as liberators. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now 73 years old and frail, was there to meet Sarah Chen. She embraced the young captain, her thin body trembling. "You did it," Yuki whispered, her voice cracking. "You broke the silence. We did it together," Sarah replied, holding the old woman who had started it all. "All of us." The debris from the satellite was distributed to laboratories across the globe. The learning accelerated exponentially. Within a decade, humanity had a fleet. It was small, only 50 ships, but each one was better than the last. The Victory-class cruisers incorporated synthesized crystalline armor and refined energy weapons alongside their brutish railguns. They were hybrids, a fusion of human desperation and Valkyrie technology. And then, in an act that shocked the few alien observers who were secretly watching, humanity stopped. The fleet, poised at the edge of the cage, did not push forward. They turned their efforts inward, building, refining, learning, and growing stronger. They were preparing for the confrontation they knew was inevitable, and they would not go until they were ready. On Velkar Prime, Archon Selithra observed this with a sense of grim vindication. "They are not impulsive," she told the nervous conclave. "They are patient. They are learning from our own technology, closing the gap with every passing year. They are making sure that when they finally come, they will not be challengers. They will be conquerors." Counselor Vithran scoffed. "You give them too much credit. They are still just." "Just what, Vithran?" Selithra interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "Just the species that turned a prison into a forge. Just the species that unified a divided world in a decade. Just the species that is patiently waiting to tear down our empire. Pray, Vithran, pray that I am wrong. For if I am not, they will come for us. And I do not believe they will be interested in our explanations." But no one in the Chamber of Stars was praying. Not yet. The war, when it began, was nothing like the grand fleet engagements the Valkyrie had prepared for. It was clinical, psychological, and utterly devastating. The first blow fell not on a border world, but on the Valkyrie industrial system of Karthner. The shipyards of Karthner were the hegemony's crown jewel, orbital factories that stretched for thousands of kilometers, producing a third of their warships. The human fleet, led by Admiral Marcus Stone, now a grizzled veteran, appeared without warning, bypassing outer defenses with frightening ease. They did not destroy the shipyards. They captured them. The battle was a masterclass in combined arms and shock tactics. Human Marines in powered assault armor stormed the crystalline stations, their movements chaotic and unpredictable to the Valkyrie defenders. They targeted control centers, captured engineers, and seized the automated production lines. Within 17 hours, the greatest industrial complex in the hegemony belonged to humanity. "Begin conversion protocols," Stone ordered from the bridge of his flagship, the Remember the Fallen. "Strip their symbols. Install our control systems. And broadcast this message on all frequencies." The message was simple. The Karthner shipyards now serve humanity. All Valkyrie personnel are prisoners of war and will be treated according to the conventions of war. Resistance is futile. Across the hegemony, the shockwave was psychic as much as physical. Enemies were supposed to destroy industry, not capture it and use it against you. The pattern repeated. Human fleets were ghosts, striking supply depots, communication hubs, and psychic amplifier stations. They systematically dismantled the nervous system of the Valkyrie Empire. And before every engagement, they would broadcast the ghost tapes, the final, hopeful transmissions from the doomed colony ships. The voices of children, of scientists, of explorers, cut off mid-sentence by Valkyrie weapons. The effect on the Valkyrie military was catastrophic. Captain Thravan of the cruiser Starlight's Resolve would later testify at his trial about the experience. "They played the recordings before they even fired a shot. I thought it was propaganda. But then I listened, truly listened. There was a woman, a botanist, describing a new type of lichen she had grown in hydroponics. She was so excited. She said it reminded her of the moss in her grandmother's garden on Earth. Then, silence. Just dead air. And I realized, we did that. We killed her for growing plants. That is when I ordered my crew to stand down. Not out of fear of their weapons, but out of shame for our own. The Valkyrie psychic councils, the hidden architects of hegemony policy, were primary targets. Colonel Sarah Chen, the third of that name, led the assault on the Council of Farsight. Their mind-reading abilities, so effective against other species, were useless against the stormy, emotional chaos of human thought. They could not predict, could not influence, could not comprehend. You cannot do this, the council leader had sputtered as human soldiers secured the chamber. We see the future. No, Colonel Chen replied coldly. You see the future you want to see. We make the future. And your future is a courtroom. The war lasted 11 years. By the end, the hegemony was in ruins, its subject species in open revolt, its fleet scattered and broken. The final act was the siege of Velkar Prime itself. Admiral Elena Stone, Marcus's granddaughter, did not order a planetary bombardment. She simply built a new cage. For 9 months, the human fleet blockaded the Valkyrie homeworld. Nothing got in or out. The Valkyrie, masters of the galaxy, were forced to stare into the silent, empty void, just as humanity had for centuries. They listened to the ghost tapes, broadcast on a continuous loop. They heard the voices of the dead, and the weight of their crime became an unbearable pressure on their collective soul. When the planetary shields finally failed, there was little fight left. The human soldiers who walked through the gleaming, silent crystal cities met with no resistance. The Valkyrie population simply watched them with hollow, defeated eyes. They had been defeated not just by weapons, but by the crushing, absolute weight of their own guilt. The surrender was unconditional. The trials that followed were the galaxy's great astonishment. Held on a neutral world, they were a spectacle of meticulous, painful, and scrupulously fair justice that lasted 17 years. Admiral Elena Stone, now humanity's chief representative, oversaw a process that judged millions of Valkyrie as individuals, not as a monolith. The architects of containment, like Councillor Vithran, were found guilty of genocide and executed. The technicians and soldiers who maintained the system received long prison sentences. The millions who had known and done nothing were exiled to barren worlds to build new societies from scratch. The children, the ignorant, the brave few who had protested, they were spared. A journalist once asked Elena, after what they did, why not simply erase them? Why this elaborate theater? Elena, her face a mask of weary resolve, had replied, destruction is easy. Justice is hard. The Valkyrie made us into monsters in their own minds. If we had simply wiped them out, we would have proven them right. We wanted to prove them wrong. We wanted to show the galaxy that humanity could be ruthless in war, but fair in peace. That we could remember every wrong, but still judge each person before us. The final verdict, delivered by Chief Judge Sarah Tanaka, Yuki's great-granddaughter, was severe, but it was not annihilation. The Valkyrie species is guilty, she declared to a watching galaxy. But this tribunal rejects the option of extinction. We will not become the ultimate fear of those we judge. The sentence is this: you are confined to your home system for 1,000 years. You will be stripped of interstellar capability. You will provide reparations. And you will remember. Every child will learn the names of the 4,317 humans who died. They will hear their voices. They will understand that choices have consequences that echo for millennia. It was a sentence of reflection, not obliteration. 1,000 years passed. The human delegation that arrived at Velkar Prime was led by Ambassador Li Chen, a woman who carried the legacy of both the pragmatic Chens and the determined Tanakas. She found a world transformed. The arrogance was gone. In the heart of the once proud Chamber of Stars stood a simple, black stone wall, polished to a mirror finish, inscribed with 4,317 names. The Valkyrie Council leader, a young female named Celestra, descended from the ancient Archon, approached her. "We have a saying now," Celestra said, her voice soft, devoid of any pride. "A warning we teach our children. Pray the humans never have reason to remember your name, for they are patient, and they do not forget." Ambassador Chen nodded slowly. "It is a wise saying. But it is incomplete." She looked around at the humbled world, at the faces that had learned the hardest lesson in the universe. "The galaxy remembers our vengeance. Let it also remember our restraint. We are patient, and we do not forget. But we are also capable of granting a second chance." She reached out, a gesture of profound symbolic weight, and took Celestra's hand. "Welcome back to the stars." As the first Valkyrie ships in a millennium powered up their engines, they did so not as masters, but as mindful students of the cosmos. The cage was gone. The silence was broken. Humanity had come, and their calls for mercy had, initially, gone unheeded. But in the end, mercy had been granted anyway. Not because it was deserved, but because humanity had chosen, in its moment of ultimate victory, to be better than its wounds. They had broken the cage, and then, they had chosen not to build another. And in that choice, they found a victory far greater than revenge.